Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Free Birth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
This week I have return guest, filmmaker, and whistleblower Jennifer Lahl. Jennifer was on the show a few seasons back tackling the harmful nature of surrogacy. And today we get into the shadow side of IVF that no one is talking about. We discuss the incredibly low success rates of IVF, the high risk to mother and baby, and how much of this information is highly suppressed. Before we get into it, I want to remind you that we are currently enrolling for the Blood Mysteries School, our coveted 16-week immersive program for becoming a sovereign cycle and fertility coach that this world obviously needs. As Jennifer and I will get into more in just a moment here, women need an alternative. They need a holistic option for support when things get confusing or imbalanced in our cycles. So many women are fed into the medical system as young teenagers through hormonal birth control and have no idea how to actually care for themselves when it comes to menstrual health, fertility, and hormonal wellness. With infertility rates rising and the insidious IVF industry profiting more and more off of our lack of holistic support and education, we need educated, wise women who are committed to sharing the truth about fertility and helping women escape the system. With our expert Blood Mysteries guides, Nancy Lucina and Kristen Hauser, who blend the scientific and the sacred so beautifully in this school, you will learn the intricacies of menstrual cycle health, including how to support women in physiological fertility journeys beyond the medical system. You will learn everything you need to become the sovereign cycle coach and women's initiation facilitator for your community. If you wish to bring honor and reverence back to the rites of passage of womanhood, the sacred blood mysteries, this school is for you. If you want to see more women walking away from big fertility and claiming their natural fertility, I urge you to please be the solution, be the alternative. If you or the women in your life are struggling with hormonal and menstrual dis-ease like PCOS, endometriosis, PMS, and infertility, the Blood Mysteries School is going to provide you not only with the path to self-healing for yourself, but the abundant, fertile career path to becoming the healer for others as well. We begin February 21st. Enroll today at bloodmysterieschool.com. All right, here's Jennifer Lahl. Welcome back to the show, Jennifer Lahl. I so appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back.
So let's just get right into it. We are here today to talk about IVF and the shadow side to IVF, the side that is harder to find. You know, I did a preliminary Google just out of curiosity, and the first 3 pages of Google are how amazing it is, the clinics, all their takes on it. It really painted a very rosy picture for 3 pages of resources. So as I said to you, I'm coming today with a list of questions to prompt you with. And for anyone joining us, the intention here is to just explore what is it, what do we need to know about it? How is it showing up in society? What are the risks? What are the dangers? And yeah, kind of the whistleblowing, element to all of this big fertility
is just so critical, because it is hard, I think, to find a lot of this information.
Yeah, it is buried deep, 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 because that's just the way the Google Analytics work.
Right.
You can pay to come up top on the search engine.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, I was going to tell you, we're doing a screening of exploitation in the membership later this month.
Oh, great. Great. Well, let me know how it goes.
Yeah. All right. So maybe first, let's just pretend that none of us know anything. And what is IVF? When would someone use it? And maybe describe the steps to it.
Yeah. So for our discussion, we're going to think about the individual woman who she herself is struggling with infertility. I speak a lot on surrogates, surrogacy using other women, egg donors using other women. But in the context of our conversation today, we're going to assume a heterosexual couple. So it's a woman and a man, a husband, a partner, whatever, that are trying to make a baby. IVF is relatively new technology. I mean, we had the first test tube baby, which was Louise Brown, born in the United Kingdom in 1978. And for your listeners who like to read books, I would commend them to read Jenna Correa's The Mother Machine. And Jenna was brilliant in her looking at what was going on with women's health, women's bodies, research, and the promotion of what I call big fertility. So when we look back at Louise Brown, the first test tube baby being born, that was like everybody in the world. It was all over the front page of the newspaper. However, in Jenna's book, we all know that many, many, many women have been used, oftentimes not even with their knowledge, in experimental, procedures to try to get to the birth of Louise Brown. So I think just historically, women don't realize that there's been so many women that have been, used as guinea pigs in order to make the first test tube baby. The IVF is under a larger umbrella term called assisted reproductive technology. The acronym is ART, like artwork. I have beautiful artwork on my wall. and so assisted reproductive technology involves anything that requires the eggs to be out of the woman's body, the sperm to be out of the man's body, the embryos to be made in the laboratory, and then implanted, frozen, discarded, whatever. So IVF is one form of assisted reproductive technology. So in the larger umbrella of assisted reproductive technologies, women that are pursuing IVF are offered a lot of what we call add-ons, right? Because the goal is not just to get a baby, but to get a perfect baby or a baby that we want, whatever that means. So we have all that different add-ons. I call them the P's, the pre-implantation genetic screening. So once the eggs are out of the body, the sperm, the little embryo's made, then we start testing it, right? Because we want to know, is it a boy? Is it a girl? Does it carry a genetic disease that's in our family history? Because we don't want to maybe pass on that genetic disease. So these are all the add-ons. ICSI is an add-on, ICSI, which is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. And whenever you see, like in the scientific journals, or sometimes even the newspaper, even like the Daily Mail, you'll see this big picture of an egg. You'll see this needle poking in the side of the egg, and they inject the sperm in to the egg to control conception, to control fertilization. So ICSI is an add-on, pre-implantation genetic screening is an add-on, obviously pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, we're screening so we can diagnose. There's a new one that's called PES, I have to read it, PES, which is polygenic embryo selection. And that's a newer technology where they're showing that we can predict probability that this child will have diabetes, probability that this child will have. So these are all, it's just not old school Louise Brown, test tube baby, one egg, one sperm, let the sperm naturally fertilize the egg. So it's more of, control. It's making sure that egg gets fertilized. It's making sure the embryo gets tested. It's making sure that we can predict what this child might be. So those are all under the umbrella of assisted reproductive technology. But I say that because women undergoing IVF are overwhelmingly offered these add-ons, because we know IVF has a very, very high failure rate. IVF is very, very expensive. Like one IVF cycle with all the add-ons is, often a 5-figure cost. It's not cheap. It's not available to poor women who are struggling with infertility. And so that's kind of, maybe I'll stop there and we can kind of go on from there if there's any follow-up questions or new question.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what you know about the embryo genetic testing. Like, just why wouldn't somebody want that? That sounds like just a smart way to optimize the process. If you're going to do it, you may as well, right?
Yeah, I think because none of the IVF add-ons that I've just mentioned have ever been studied to prove that they actually, one, help people. I mean, the goal is to help people get pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of these add-ons have proven that they have been successful in helping people get pregnant. They have not proven to be successful in helping people have a baby, and they've not been proven to be safe. And as we get into more and more of our discussion, I will talk about how we know that IVF is unsafe to the embryo. We know that ICSI is unsafe, the actual pushing the sperm in with a needle into
safety measured by what?
Measured by outcome. A healthy baby, a healthy pregnancy, a successful live birth. There's just been no studies that have proven that these, even though they're called add-ons, add any benefit by research, by data. And they're expensive once you start adding on these to just regular old nilly-vanilly IVF, which I'm not a fan of.
So what about this high versus regular high stimulation protocols versus low stimulation, where there's significantly less medication?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that, or know about the long-term effects of, or success even, of those two options?
Well, I think for one, the fact that they, when I say they, I'm speaking of reproductive endocrinologists, which is the specialty of the doctors that do fertility medicine. I think it's important to know, well, why did they come up with a less is better approach? One is because they know it's this harmful. These high dose powerful hormones are harmful and damaging to the woman, just the woman alone, it's her body. So, there's no guarantee. Yes, it's a lighter touch. It's like I only smoke 5 cigarettes a day instead of a pack a day. I only drive 10 miles over the speed limit instead of 50 miles over the speed limit. So, it's this notion that if I do it this way, it's safer. But again, that's not.
Is it not?
It's not been proven. I can't say it's that. I mean, I want to say yes. If I only eat 3 Oreo cookies versus a package of Oreo cookies, that's not very bad for me. That's less bad for me. So it's that kind of calculus where, in my mind, you're still playing with risks. You're just trying to either naively convince yourself that this is better for me or less harmful, but the reality is it's still harmful. It's still harmful to stimulate a woman's ovaries to produce eggs, to then surgically extract those eggs and then mechanically, fertilize those eggs and then transfer those eggs back into your womb. That's a lot of steps. That's a lot of intervention where things can go wrong along the way. Yes, there's people that have had successful live births and have happy, healthy babies. But the question is, how are those women's health long term? And how are those children's health long term? And we now, since 1978, the first test tube baby, we've now been at this long enough that we have quite a lot of really good research with has large sample sizes, because there's lots of children running around the planet now that have been made this way, that show that the risks to women's health and to the children that are born through these technologies is not guaranteed to be fine.
So what is the harm?
Well, let's look at, I'm going to look at my notes just to keep myself straight. So I talked about ICSI, and ICSI used to be just seen as, like just benign, because the reason ICSI came about was to address male infertility. And male infertility usually looks like poor low sperm count and or poor motility. So the sperm aren't really the greatest quality, and they poop out or don't get to their destination. So we'll help them by just isolating one and then just, shooting it into the egg. We now know that there's something about the way those little, like if you see fertilization in a microscope and you just see it like happen naturally, and it's not really natural because it's in a petri dish, but you know what I mean. They all just kind of swim around. And, it's like they know whether they have an antenna or there's some kind of a chemical thing, but they know which one's going to actually burrow in and make it into the center of that egg, and boom, you're going to see the cells start to divide, because you're going to have that, beginning blastocyte, zygote, fetus, embryo, But we now know that technique is harmful, actually puncturing the wall of an egg and shooting a sperm into the egg. Though we don't know yet why is that harmful. We haven't said, because X, Y, and Z is happening in the wall of the egg, or the wrong sperm that shouldn't have made it in. We decided which one. We don't yet know. So we're learning that that's harmful. And so it's harmful in that we've now seen that the children that are used with ICSI have higher rates of chromosomal abnormalities. So it's an issue of chromosome development, which makes sense, because that's when the DNA strands unravel and they start raveling, and the DNA is where all the chromosomes are. Higher rates of birth defects in kids that use ICSI. And so we backed off on using ICSI, because it used to be, again, it was for male infertility or male subfertility. And then it became like, well, this is expedited. We'll just always use ICSI on, any IVF, we'll just use ICSI, because we can control fertilization. We can we can get an egg fertilized. And now they backed off on, again, just trying to use ICSI to address male subfertility or infertility, because we found out these problems that come about in children.
If they got the ICSI add-on and did the genetic testing, wouldn't they then be able to rid out the embryos?
Well, not necessarily, because the add-ons haven't been proved to do what they say that they do. And how many times have you heard a story of a woman being told she's having a baby that has X, and then she has a perfectly healthy baby?
Totally.
Or she's having a baby that has, it's perfectly healthy, everything looks good, and then she delivers a baby with Down syndrome or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we just know in reality that a lot of testing is false, inaccurate, misses things.
Mm-hmm.
So
women are getting the ICSI and the genetic testing, and then still birthing babies with chromosomal disorders and birth defects, etc.
Yeah, or healthy babies, because it's just, again, use the example of the person who smokes who never gets lung cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who never smokes and gets, some of it's just a roll of the dice. You could live your life just perfectly A-OK fine.
Yeah.
And then, things happen. So, it's a gamble. It's a roll of the dice. It's, but.
So taking away the add-ons, although I think the genetic testing is pretty par for the course these days. Is that true?
Genetic testing?
Is it true? I have this idea in my head that I don't know if it's accurate or not, that genetic testing is standard with most clinics, that you're not, that putting the fresh embryo in to the woman isn't as common anymore, and the freezing in so that you can test it is more standard. Is that true?
I don't think so. I think what's true, this is what I would say is true. Every step of the way is quality controlled. So the minute they harvest, I don't like these words, they harvest the eggs out of the woman's body, like she's a chicken and you're going out to harvest. They grade them. Eggs are graded. The minute sperm is collected, it's analyzed and it's graded. Fast swimmers, poor swimmers, not enough. Everything's graded. Then they make the embryos. The embryos are graded because they always make many embryos. Even in the lighter touch fertility medicine, even in the less is better, they still are going to end up with, say, 4 or 5 or 6 embryos. Those embryos get graded because they're going to implant the best one first. Mm-hmm. Now, whether in the grading process they actually choose to do genetic testing, which, think about it. Okay, you've got an early embryo's 8 cells, 16 cells, that's how the cells divide. And at that early stage of like 5 to 6 days of development, they go in with the needle again in this little embryo and they extract a cell, because they have to have a genetic material to test. Mm-hmm. And you have to wonder, is that a necessary cell that's been removed from this early developing? It'd be like baking a whole cake and you remove the eggs and you didn't put the eggs in it. That's a very necessary ingredient. So it's just quality control from the minute egg and sperm are out of the bodies, because the game, which is why back to your Google search, it's all about success. It's all about how great, how wonderful. They don't talk about the high failure rate. And why do they make so many embryos? And why do they put the best one in and freeze the other ones that are suboptimal? And all of this grading is subjective. Of course. It's based on who's looking through the microscope and says, oh, this looks like a good egg. And then Joe comes on duty the next day and he goes, oh, that looks like a bad egg. It's very subjective.
Okay, so I want to get back to the harm, because we covered the some harm of the add-ons, but what about like just your light touch, no add-ons, just like your, tried and true IVF process with, if someone, like I know women who are more holistically minded who will try to optimize their IVF journey for minimal risk, minimal medications, which is almost laughable because the whole thing is that, of course, but let's speak to that. Like what are the things what does it look like, first of all? Because I still feel like, a lot of us are very ignorant about what even the process of IVF is. And then what are the harms? What are the dangers that you want women to know about?
Yeah. Well, the less is better approach is new. So the studies that we have is not overwhelmingly going to be capturing those women. So, I think because back to, again, 1978, for 78, 98, 2008, 2018, it was your standard old IVF kind of procedure. So a lot of the studies will be of those women and the children that were born from that, that subset. So I'm not aware, I'm not saying they don't exist, but since it's not been around for that long, this less is better approach, I'm not aware of any really good studies that have been done just specifically looking at that category of women. So okay. A lot of the studies that I will use today in our discussion might have included those women, but it will not separate them out. These are just women that used IVF. So when you think of your group of women that are considering IVF, they want to do it the best way, the good way. And I get those people all the time. And a lot of times they're religious people. We're not going to do genetic screening because we'll take whatever baby that we want. We're not going to create, 15 embryos because we don't want any of them to go in the freezer. We're just going to make 1 or 2 and implant whatever those ones are and do none of that testing. Mm-hmm. But I still say, you're still required to take fertility drugs, perhaps lower doses. You're still going to undergo the harvesting procedure, the needle laparoscopic or up transvaginally, to puncture your ovaries to remove, the eggs, you're still going to put them into the petri dish and, get them to maybe naturally let the little sperm do their thing, and the winner gets to pick who wins on their own. But, here's one study, if you'll just bear with me so I can read it, and it's called The Effects of Chemical and Physical Factors on Embryo Culture. Culture is what they're in, the little petri dish, the medium that they're cultured in. And it says, the development of the embryo outside the body means that it is constantly exposed to stresses that it would not experience in vivo. In vivo in the body. So you've already got this little embryo that has no sense of where the hell am I? Why am I out here in this cold, cruel world? I'm supposed to be in my mother's womb. Sources of the stress on the human embryo include identified factors such as pH, temperature shifts, exposure to high percentage of oxygen, which you're not going to get in the womb, buildup of toxins that are in the environment, and on and on and on. And these factors play a significant role in influencing the development of that embryo because it's not in a natural environment. Even if you do the less is better approach, you're still taking that process of conception, fertilization, whatever you want to call it, into, a laboratory, an open environment.
Okay, and then keep going. So then what is harmful for the woman and mother once it's been fertilized, it's an embryo, they've decided which one's going to go. Now what happens?
Well, okay, so let's say she gets pregnant, and, then that leads us back to, the raw data that shows that it's a very high failure rate.
Do we have, I was curious about more specific stats.
And again, it's, your Google search is hard to find. And what you can find is it's the only place that's tracked in the United States is the CDC.
Well, I was going to ask you that because I have gathered that IVF clinics and even individual doctors will inflate their success rates. And so is there a place that we can see real reported success?
Yeah. And that is going to be on the CDC website. So every single fertility agency in the United States is obligated to report their data. The problem with the CDC data is it's very, it's just a minuscule amount of data. So they will tell you, the most recent report that's on the CDC website, say, it's 2023 now. So everybody's out there collecting their data, blah, 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 blah. 2024, they have to submit their data to the CDC. And then in 2025, the CDC issues a report. So the most recent data we have now is from 2020, because that's just the way the process works. In the United States alone, there was 326,468 IVF cycles performed, just IVF cycles. And of that, 79,942 resulted in a live birth. That's a 24.5% success rate. So that's just raw data of how many cycles were done and how many resulted in a live birth. And by definition, a live birth means the baby was delivered alive, but could have died 1 minute later.
Right.
It still gets registered as a live birth because it wasn't born dead. It was born alive. So, and back to, the risk, one of the risks is these children are compromised because of the way they've been produced. So, but when we look at those, how many number cycles, it's really hard to get down in the weeds. You don't know how old was the woman.
Exactly.
What was her underlying fertility issue? Don't know. Was the live birth a surrogate pregnancy? Was the IVF cycle performed using your eggs, but then put in Debbie's womb? It breaks down fresh or frozen eggs, fresh or frozen donor eggs. So it's really hard to just parse out. But I still think when you look at this big, huge number of 350,000 cycles, and you've got less than 80,000 just live births, were those twin births, were those triplet births, were those, it's just, and I've been tracking the CDC data for 10 years. And even with new and improved, less is better, we're going to do it this way, we're not going to do XE, we're not going to do this, those numbers stay at, a 75% failure rate.
That's really high.
And, and for the woman who's deciding, I'm going to refer your, maybe you can put this in the show notes. My partner, Callie Fell, who works with me at the CBC, she did a very, very comprehensive report. And she's a labor and delivery nurse. So she, and she was a bench research scientist in a previous life studying women, endometriosis in women. So she knows the science, and she did a comprehensive report on the state of the landscape of assisted reproductive technologies. And she's got like one part of it is, for the woman thinking about selling her eggs, for the woman thinking about being a surrogate, for the woman thinking about doing IVF for herself, for the woman thinking about doing IVF with a donor egg, so it's really parsed out and it's heavily researched with the studies. So for people that really want to like zero in, and we actually tell people if there's a new study that comes about, let us know, because we want this to be a living document that's constantly being updated with new research. But for the woman who's thinking about using her own eggs, I just tell her there's a high failure rate. This is incredibly hard on your body. There's plenty of studies out there on, like Clomid and being associated with thyroid cancer and non-lymphoma Hodgkin's cancer. I think the verdict is still not out yet on breast cancer or other reproductive cancers. I mean, I always use the case of Gilda Radner. Some of your people are much younger than I am, but I, grew up on Gilda Radner, the comedian on Saturday Night Live, and she was married to Gene Wilder, and they went through 6 rounds of IVF, never were able to conceive, and she died of ovarian cancer. And when you have to be sort of savvy when you read the studies, because we know that women typically get breast cancer in their 40s and 50s. And so there's a lot of studies out there that say fertility drugs don't cause breast cancer, but when you dig down in, you see that they only follow the women till they were in their 30s. And you really have to follow women over, to when women normally get this cancer to be able to say that definitively. We know that a woman who does IVF and uses donor eggs has high rates of preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, things like that, because she's got foreign eggs in her body, right? Like the surrogate who's got a foreign embryo in her body. The same thing applies.
Yeah, we were talking about IVF in the private membership, and there's a nurse, I guess, I don't know what type of nurse she is, that she was interacting with this, I guess an ICU nurse, because she said that I posted the question, why wouldn't you do IVF? I just kind of wanted to see what people had to say. And this nurse said, on the sole experience of watching how many women have come into my ward with serious complications. And I asked her to elaborate, and just like stroke and cancer, and the amount, she said the amount of stroke that she saw women coming in with. I mean, what?
Yeah, and there was a new study that was just published in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, on stroke and women who did IVF. And for people that want to read that, and it's not a surprise. I mean, this one particular study, because you have to read the limitations of the study, which is, again, I'm a little nerdy that way. And one of the limitations was that they, kind of back to the CDC data, they didn't separate out what kind of fertility medicine treatment the woman had, which is problematic because you don't know what was right. IVF or which technique they use. And then the other limitation was just encoding. And I see that all the time, like egg donors who have complications go into the ER and they're coded as abdominal distension.
Right.
Versus ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome.
Because that's what she said she saw.
The reason they're presenting themselves is because their belly's full of fluid. Mm-hmm. So the doctor writes, diagnosis, abdominal distension, bloating, fluid in the belly, whatever. So that doesn't get coded. So you can't go back and pull out every woman who came in through the ER right. had ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome.
So anything to say about the increased medicalization of the pregnancy, the increased NICU, stays of IVF babies? I mean, that anecdotally, as a doula in the system for so long, anecdotally, it was the case. You know, the IVF moms they had more everything, and their babies had more time in the NICU. But what is kind of like definitely true about that?
And again, back to our document on our website, there's 2 very good studies that were done in California where I live, which is important to me because we're like, I say we're the reproductive tourist state of the country. And they were done at Loma Linda Hospital, which is a good academic university teaching hospital. So they see the worst of the worst often in those kind of hospitals. But it was a perinatologist who was one of the authors on the 2 different studies at Loma Linda. And one was sort of a snapshot of just assisted reproductive technology pregnancies at Loma Linda for one year bracketed. So it could have been just women doing IVF on their own, just with them. It could have been surrogates. It could have been women who used egg donors, but just a snapshot of that. And then he did parse out another study which looked just at surrogacy pregnancies. And you're right. These are women that are in high-risk pregnancies. They're in high-risk pregnancies, which means they're admitted to the hospital weeks, if not months, before their due date, because they're trying to keep this mom pregnant for as long as they can, so that the baby can be delivered and be viable. And then, of course, because the mother has been in this high-risk pregnancy, these children are overwhelmingly spending weeks, if not months, in the NICU. That is, if they make it. And he said that they had a 4 to 5-fold increase in stillbirth. C-section and hospital stays were up because of these high risks. And he also did a really good job of just parsing out, like, what happens when a regular old woman who's just pregnant the old-fashioned way comes in, delivers her baby, and goes home, versus this. And then, like, the financial is just off the charts for what it costs, this high-risk pregnancy.
A clinic told my friend that having an IVF pregnancy does not label her high risk. And I was like, of course it does. Of course it does, that they're not telling you the truth.
Yeah, they don't want to label her high risk, but I mean, that's great that they're not telling her that she's high risk. We just.
But I mean, once she goes to the
Fertility and Sterility, which is the industry's journal. I mean, it's the Journal of the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. The people I call the bad guys, even their own study show that these IVF pregnancies are high risk. High risk with preeclampsia, maternal hypertension, gestational diabetes, premature birth, low birth weight infants, on and on and on and on. Yes, you may roll the dice and that might not be you, but you are naive if you think it's not high risk.
Oof, right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So what do you think about the collateral damage from all these abandoned frozen embryos?
Oh, collateral damage. Well,
like, is it true? I gathered that there's over 1 million abandoned embryos
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
Yeah,
and I just wonder your thoughts.
All abandoned. There's 1 million frozen embryos.
Okay.
Some of them have not yet been abandoned.
So what is the process if a family freezes 15, they go on to have a child? What happens with the agreement with these embryos? If they don't want them, do they just dump them? How does all that work?
Yeah, so they're working obviously with an agency that is storing them and keeping them frozen. And that's one of the areas where there's regulation, because they have to regulate what's the temperature and what happens if the power goes out, and is there a generator? Because there's been incidences where fertility agencies have lost power, and that means embryos thaw out. So the parents have to pay a storage fee, and that's usually a monthly. It's not cheap, but it's not crazy expensive, but it's not cheap. And if you've got your embryos frozen for 5 or 10 or 15 years, it adds up.
Right.
But it's the parents that get to make it's called the disposition decision. What happens to their frozen children? So they can make the disposition decision to keep them frozen indefinitely and just keep paying the storage fee. They can donate them to scientific medical research to, do, which I'm not a fan of, because that's a whole other problem of ethics. They can opt to get them adopted, through these embryo adoption programs. So people adopt
Whoa.
people's embryos, or they can let them die. That's kind of the fortune. Well, I guess they could choose to implant them. They could have 15 kids.
Right.
But the reality is, because back to the research on the exposure of the embryo in this unnatural environment, a lot of embryos don't survive being frozen. They don't survive the thaw. They don't survive being thawed. They don't successfully implant. So there's a lot of embryo loss in that process. But there are people out there. Just last year, I think it was, a couple donated their frozen embryos, and the couple that adopted the frozen embryo had been frozen longer than this couple had been alive. So say this couple, they were in their 20s, the embryo had been frozen for like 25 years. So they adopted an embryo that had been frozen longer than they'd been walking on the planet, which just makes me crazy, because I just think, what is the long-term effect of freezing a human embryo for 25 years and then bringing it to life? And will we see negative health complications? Or, when I look back at like Dolly the sheep, when they cloned Dolly the sheep, and everybody thought, oh, she looks just like a sheep. However, she got really old really fast, and very obese, and had to be euthanized. So you kind of wonder what kind of damage is.
So do you know any sort of update on that story about the physical or mental health?
It's the baby's probably a year old now, or if you're in China, you'd call the baby 26. Because all those years of being frozen would count. But it was born. The headlines were it was born a healthy, normal appearing baby, but we don't know, again, at the cellular level. But yeah, we know now that there's the children that are created through IVF, assisted reproductive technologies, have higher rates of heart defects. Obviously all the preterm, low birth weight kind of stuff, which, that has longer term complications. If a baby's born a preemie, they might have all kinds of complications. They have higher rates of high blood pressure, obesity, insulin resistant diabetes. These are just some of the studies that have come out on, cancers. We're now knowing that some of these children through IVF have higher rates of cancer, but we don't find that out until after the children are older.
And you pair that with the C-section and the NICU stay and the formula bottle feeding, the whole trajectory of their like technocratic life.
And it's just amazing that people would kind of go, I don't think it's risky.
Or that it's a risk worth taking.
Yeah. And I'm incredibly sympathetic to people who, for whatever reason, can't have children. And that's why when people come to me and they say, we're struggling with conceiving, I always say, you need to get yourself to a really good practitioner that will give you a good diagnosis and really understand what's going on, so they can try to naturally heal and correct your body, so that if you are able to conceive, you can conceive naturally. And the caveat is there still always will be people on the planet that, for whatever reason, won't be able to conceive. Infertility has been with us since the age of time.
And there's that paired with the impatience, I want it now, 5 years of work versus some medication and procedures now, I think is a huge deterrent. And as we talked about in our other conversation, women are waiting until their 40s to try to conceive. And then if it's going to take some time, or if years of healing is now needed, if they discover that they're infertile, they don't have that time. So they are facing a really challenging reality.
Yeah, and the older woman who is successful in conceiving through IVF is even more at risk of complications because of her age and because of the way in which she got pregnant. And you have to, to me, a big ethical part of this is also finances. I think it's problematic that we're impatient. I want it now. But coupled with that is, and I also have the money. I can afford to do this. I mean, if you're a low income couple that is struggling and you want it now, and they say, well, it's going to cost you $80,000 to do, all this stuff. You're like, well, I don't have that money. Because I try to live my life more kind of just other oriented, and I think it's problematic that these are bad technologies that people want, but they're only available to people that have the means. I don't want to make it cheap or free so that low income women can have it. I don't want anybody to have it, but it is that sort of entitlement. I want it and I have the money to buy it, so I'm going to get it.
Or you have the health insurance that will cover it.
But health insurance is not going to cover a lot of this. I mean, health insurance oftentimes will cover some diagnostic stuff. So, do I have blocked fallopian tubes? Do I have endometriosis? It might, do some testing. It might provide, some of the fertility drugs. But still, it's, it can get, most people don't do one IVF cycle and take home a happy cute little baby.
I think, my friend who's considering it, that inspired this conversation, her insurance will cover the first round.
Yeah. And it's very rare that the first round, unless the first round involves 15 eggs that end up with 10 embryos. And so you have, and again, that encourages them to really aggressively get a lot of eggs so that they can make more embryos. Because you only have the money for one shot. And so let's try to get a lot of eggs so that we can keep trying it when it doesn't work. And we just know when you force ovulation, the eggs are crappy. They're not meant to be ginned up and super ovulated and forced out. It's a natural process of how, all the little egg follicles, I call them little cheerleaders, and they all get together and they're every month the cycle and they're cheering and one makes it out. And that's intentional. That's a design of our bodies and the function of our bodies. So when you're forcing all these eggs, you're going to get poor quality eggs, and poor quality eggs make poor quality embryos.
Meaning they're poor quality because they are getting forced out and they're not getting naturally selected to be the one that drops. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. It's a control. And it's a false, naive sense of control that we're in charge here, and we know better than your body. We know better than your cycle. We can just make all this happen. And we've seen that. I always like to say Mother Nature bats last, because we think it's just the hubris of it all. And now, 30 years later, we're going, oh my God, women's health has been compromised and the children's health has been compromised. And we've got 1 million frozen embryos in the US.
I'm thinking about the kind of the stuff that would be impossible to track, like the nervous system of the IVF baby, and developing the difference of a frozen embryo versus a fresh embryo, like these things that we don't really have metrics to track.
And really, I always say, would you bring meat out of your freezer that had been frozen for 25 years and serve it to your family for dinner?
Right.
I mean, you kind of go in this tiny little embryo.
No, but we would do it if it was frozen for a year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think most women I know aren't considering a 25-year frozen embryo. It's like it's their own, most likely, and it's frozen just long enough for the genetic testing.
Yeah. But there's been plenty of really good books out there that have been written by women who have pursued what I call the superhighway of fertility medicine. They get you on it. There's no off ramps. There's no exits. There's no slow down, yield. It's just, we'll try it again. We'll try it again. We'll try it again. And, and I'm thinking of Miriam Zoll's book called Cracked Open. And she just felt like she'd been cracked open.
Mm.
And, she and her husband were not able to conceive. There's several other books out there like that of women that just get put on this. And it's, of course, it's, again, it's Mary Lou Singleton. You can't say no to technology. If it fails the first time, well, the next time it's going to work. It's like the gambler at the casinos. Well, the next time I'm going to win. The next time, and you've spent so much money in your
right,
whole
and you
life.
need it to work.
Yeah. This person I know that works at a major university that doesn't want to do IVF, they get flack from the hospital administrators because they're not bringing in dough. They're not bringing in the money. And if you have a woman that has really severe endometriosis, that might involve a very lengthy surgical procedure, to try to clean up and clear out that endometriosis, which isn't a big money grab for a hospital. So physicians who sort of push back on this method of helping people take flack because they're not dragging in the dough. And I remember interviewing for Exploitation. When you show it to your group, the doctor at Columbia Medical School, he told me that the fertility clinic at Columbia University in New York City makes so much money that it funds the whole entire OBGYN department.
Mm.
So the fertility medicine arm of hospitals or universities is kind of like their football team, that brings in a lot of money. So if you're not a doctor that wants to get on that program and wants to do even the lesser, lightest better, lesser, big gun drugs, it's frowned upon because it's not dragging in a lot of money.
Sure. I wonder if we could touch on IUI real quick, of just what is it? What would you want women to know about it?
IUI again is where they take the sperm out of the man's body, intrauterine insemination. It's it's the old-fashioned turkey basters and syringes. They just a man will masturbate, ejaculate in a cup, and then they just suck it up and shoot it up. When I was a staff nurse at the University of California in San Francisco, a lot of the nurses I worked with would pal up with a male nurse friend, and say, "Hey, I want to have a baby on my own. Will you give me some of your sperm?" And they literally go home with the little piston syringes and doing some. It's we call it low tech fertility medicine because it really.
Well, I've supported quite a few lesbian couples that just at home, they don't involve the medical world at all. They just have a male donor come over.
And it's an add-on that my OBGYN friend. Male infertility can be fixed too, so that you can naturally conceive just through regular intercourse. And a lot of times it's vitamins. It's stuff that you could go to CVS and buy. It's things like changing your underwear, not sitting around in the hot tub, maybe losing some 10 or 15 pounds if you're overweight, and some dietary nutritional supplements. So IUI, again, as an add-on, has not been proven to be necessarily successful in cases of dealing with male infertility. Now, your lesbian couples, they're not dealing with a man who has a fertility issue, I'm assuming. They're dealing with a man who's, so then in that case it works. But when you're thinking, again, back to the infertile couple who's considering IVF or IUI, a lot of things can be done just to naturally improve sperm quantity, sperm quality, all those kind of things. And it's the same thing with, eggs. It takes one. You need one egg and one sperm. That's all you need. And it's amazing what these doctors who aren't willing to do the big guns fertility stuff can do to actually improve the chances of a man who's struggling with subfertility to become fertile.
But in IUI, the woman still has to drop the egg at the perfect time.
Yeah. It's and again, it's mechanistic. And it's, for me, it's all about drawing lines. Where is my line? And for me, my line is what can be done in keeping egg and sperm in the body to help a couple conceive. So for me, the line is, once the eggs have come out of the body or the sperm and the embryo's made, that's my line. Obviously, not everybody agrees with me. They draw their line somewhere else. I won't use a surrogate. I won't use a donor egg. I won't do it more than 3. Everybody has their lines. But for me, it's like, let's get medicine, fertility, health, naturopathic, whatever. Let's get people back to this is how the body is supposed to work. The body isn't working that way. Let's figure out a proper diagnosis. Why isn't the body working the way it's supposed to work? And what can we do naturally to get the body doing it? Yeah. And that's my line.
What do you know, or what have you seen around IVF affecting marriages?
Well, I've had, I can remember 2 gentlemen in particular when I've spoken at lectures come up to me afterwards in tears because their wife died from complications of IVF.
Oh my God.
3-4 years later, was diagnosed with raging cancer. So that obviously impacts a marriage when there's a spouse that has died. And I'm not laughing because I think it's funny, but it doesn't impact the marriage. Yes, again, back to the women who have written books like Miriam's Soul's Cracked Open. Your whole entire relationship all of a sudden is turned upside down. It's driven by the calendar. It's driven by when do we have to have intercourse. It's oh my God, I started my period. I didn't conceive. We failed again. And that it takes its toll. The finances, it takes its toll. Fertility drugs, and again, I'm a woman, so I can say this. Sometimes it makes us a little crazy. It's just you've got these, and you turn into somebody. You look at yourself in the mirror, and you kind of go, "Who am I? What have I become?" So there's just so many layers of stress. Children become a product or project. You're working for this project, and then that burden, if and when you do have a child, the children are oftentimes under this. We wanted you so badly. We wanted you so. So
you're a miracle baby.
Yeah. So there's all that kind of and that doesn't necessarily have to be harmful. I mean, our children should be wanted and loved and all that kind of stuff. But there's sort of an added, maybe even an expectation you have to perform a certain way because your parents spend so much money to get you. I did, what was it? Way back, I did the Montel Williams show. And it was on, it was called Extreme Baby Making. And there was this one woman that was on the panel with me that was like a very wealthy, like New York City socialite who had spent at that time $750,000 on her fertility treatment to have her children. And all I could think of on the inside was, oh my God, the pressure on those children, knowing that they basically are like almost $1 million kids. It costs them. So yeah, there's so many layers of this. And then if you don't have a child, I mean, I know several of my friends that have never been able to have children, and a couple of them that did go down the IVF route. And just that sort of coming to terms that you're a married couple and you don't have kids, in a world that's, if you're married, this is the package. And just having to come to terms with the fact that, we can still have a really good, happy, productive, meaningful life without children. And there's just a lot of grief in the process that has to go through when you've tried everything, and it didn't work.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Anything else do you feel like we've left out or that we should touch on before we wrap?
Yeah, I guess I would just, I would speak to, again, your audience is overwhelmingly women.
It better be.
Huh?
I said it better be.
Yeah. Well, there might be some interlopers, some men that kind of eavesdrop. But yeah, I just want to end with really, really, really get a proper diagnosis and see if there's things that you can do naturally, and to see if you can quickly come to terms, if it's your story, with your life. It's not a death sentence if you don't have children. And I know I have children, and people go, well, you can't say that you have children. Oh, I can say I was never raped, but I can say, well, rape's awful. No, you can't say that. You were never raped. Just to come to terms with you're a full and complete human being, and you're here on this planet to do amazing, wonderful things. And if you have really strong mothering instincts, there's all kinds of ways to mother the world's children. And even if they haven't come out of your own womb, you can be an amazing aunt, or you can volunteer in your local back to school program. There's ways that we can mother if for some reason, we have not been given children. And to those that have kids, welcome those people into your circle. Because we live in a world that kind of puts us in groups. And, you're the married with kids, and you're the married without kids, and you're the married that's trying to have kids. Blend us all in together, and be mindful that maybe your friend that's struggling with infertility doesn't want to be invited to a baby shower. But you quietly ask her, I would like you to come. We're having a baby shower, but I understand that this might be hard for you. So you make the call, and just have those kind of really personal conversations with people that and have that relationship with. That you feel that you can have those kind of talks with, and that I want you to feel included in our family's life.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate your time.
I like being with you. It's mutual.
And if anyone wants to follow up with you and look into your work, how can they find you?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. You just put in my name, Jennifer Lahl. You can follow us at the cbc-network.org, where you can find the free download PDF of our comprehensive report. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the show today. You can support this podcast by donating to it on freebirthsociety.com and leaving an awesome review on whatever platform you listen on. The more reviews, the more visibility the show gets, so let's spread the word of sovereign birth. We've always got a lot going on at Free Birth Society, and you can find out about all of it at freebirthsociety.com, at Free Birth Society on Instagram, and opt in to my newsletter below in the show notes. We offer courses on free birth, authentic midwifery, and the blood mysteries, as well as one-on-one coaching, in-person retreats, and of course, our annual Women's Festival. Our exclusive, vetted, private membership is definitely something to check out if you're looking for a community of wise sisters. Together we rise. We must speak our stories, claim our lives, and support one another. This is the living revolution, and I am so grateful to be in it with all of you. I'll leave you with our epic Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red.
I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts. Keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back from the stars. Conscious